Welcome to Footnotes of History, a podcast that seeks to emancipate our listeners and indeed, well, mainly our presenters from the shackles of ignorance of our past. With you as always are myself, Daniel Nesbitt, and the great emancipator, Tim Philpott.
Thanks, Dan. Today we are discussing, as you may have guessed from Dan's brief introduction there, the abolition of serfdom in Russia, 1861.
It's a fascinating topic, I think. Maybe because also, when anyone says freedom in the 1860s, you immediately think of the American Civil War,
Yes.
the Emancipation Proclamation,
Yeah.
and the freedom of the slaves in America. But in fact, across the other side of the world, really, you've got another massive system of repression against.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, we should probably. I mean, we'll go into detail about what serf is, of course. But it is essentially slavery for, sort of land-bound slavery, or is it?
Yeah, no, I think it is.
It's less. It's less. I feel like it's less. Less restricted.
Yeah, and it's
only better, obviously, but
it's definitely not the same as slavery, but it has a huge amount of restrictions to it, as we'll come to, and as you'll see. And I think in terms of history, it's definitely been overshadowed by the freedom of slaves and the ending of slavery in America.
Funnily enough, I was going to say, historically speaking, whenever anyone sort of discusses either this topic or the American Civil War and its aftermath, the two are never. It's like they're two separate. I mean, although they happened pretty much in the exact same period of time, within a couple of years of each other, they're considered almost separate separate worlds. I mean, they are separate worlds, but I mean they are.
Yeah, they're not kind of. You're not thinking of the
parallels
same.
Are not seen.
Yeah, you're not saying that it's almost part of a sort of ideology of liberalisation and is not the same thing that's crossing into different areas. But on with the podcast, shall we say. So
I also did want. Sorry, I know you just said onward, but I'm going to hold you back slightly further.
I'm just trading at the leash.
There is an interesting fun.
Sounds a bit 50 Shades of Grey.
Jesus Christ. That's not what this podcast is. It's a family audience. So anyway. So if you think of the 1860s, you probably think of. But this is again one of those key. This is one of the big contrasts of this in this episode we're going to find is that essentially Russia is, as you get, it's still an mostly agrarian society. When I can pronounce it, the agrarian society. So in the 1860s, they have serfs tied to land, feudal landlords, this kind of thing. Over in America, they're building oil refineries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it just shows the gulf in sort of progress,
development.
Really.
Yeah. I mean,
so. It's quite fascinating, but it's one of those weird things about Russia almost. Throughout history, almost they always seem to have this great potential, but also it lags behind other countries.
Especially during this period. I think,
definitely.
I mean, I don't think communism particularly helped that much either. But yeah. I mean, sorry, carry on.
No, so shall we talk about where and how serfdom?
Yeah.
What is it? What is this thing?
What is this thing? Serfdom? Well, I think we should probably start by saying that serfdom. It was quite a sort of general thing across Europe during the feudal, what we refer to as the Middle Ages.
Yeah, so if you're thinking of 12th, 13th, 14th centuries in Western Europe, serfdom is a thing. Serfdom, I think when I was reading this, I was thinking back to when I was at school learning about it in terms of you have a serf, which is what we might now look on as a peasant kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he and his family and his community live on the land.
And literally all of his predecessors and ancestors.
Absolutely. Yeah. They all live on this patch of land. They farm it, but instead of keeping all of the produce themselves, they have to give a large portion of it away to the person who owns the land, the landowner. In England, it would be a baron or an earl kind of thing, and they basically give us a large split of their crops away in sort of a tribute, a tithe to the landowner. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I think it sort of starts off as a kind of it's, if you think about it like in the way you think of the mafia, right? Protection money. So in some ways, they are almost paying the landlord because obviously the landlord are the knights of the king, the king's representatives across the country to keep the country in
law and order.
Indeed,
so that's very special. Yeah, it was a protection thing on one hand, but they paid pretty dearly for it.
Well, exactly. Yeah, well, I suppose that's the good one because obviously they just killed them.
Yeah,
but yeah. So I mean, I'm not saying I'm not defending it or anything, but
you can definitely see its roots.
Barbaric. Yeah. But you can see how they managed to sort of convince peasants that this was a good thing for them, and also in some ways peasants would come to certain lords in order for their protection from other lords who tended. There's this constant violence in this period between different knights and lords.
And in Russia, I think serfdom really evolved in kind of a gradual process.
Yeah.
So almost from about the 11th century onwards, you see more restrictions being placed on the lower classes and the peasants, and you see gradually, slowly but surely, an evolution as well from slavery, which was still legal in Russia until the 1700s, or 1720s.
Yeah.
When Peter the Great abolished it, but basically made all the slaves into serfs.
Yeah.
So he gave them a kind of basically just a job description change from slave to serf.
Yeah.
And then
it's like one rung up, isn't it? But
basically,
it's not
really a huge rung up. I think
quite a weird
especially in those days, I imagine it was a very cosmetic change.
Yeah.
Like, you're no longer a slave, you're just a serf.
Yeah. I mean, as you were saying about classes of people, even that's quite cosmetic.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, I'm still in the medieval context. Sorry, this is because this is why this is interesting, because it's the 19th century. Western Europe has moved out of the serfdom phase,
but Russia's still clinging on to it.
Just desperately clinging on.
Yeah. But I think one of the key dates for serfdom as we see it in this period is 1649, and this is where it was kind of eventually consolidated into what we would see in the later stages as serfdom. So travel between towns and land is prohibited for serfs. So it's one of the key things. If you are born on a plot of land, you're basically going to live, work and die on that plot of land, and belonging to that same landowner. And sort of, this 1649 code really basically creates serfdom as we see it in the period, I think, is what we end up seeing. And we see the nobility are then basically dominant at that time.
Yeah, well, it's sort of an institutionalization
that's what it is,
of the basically, if another landowner finds someone else's, because I feel like everybody almost sort of knew what the rule was. It's almost like obviously all the serfs were also obviously so scared that they were obviously to be killed as well.
Yeah.
That it was like, oh look, there's a serf who isn't from this area. We need to report him and send him back immediately. So he can't go anywhere. It's just horrific. But go on.
No, and I think so. From this point onwards, we see the Russian peasantry really under a huge amount of sort of very structured life.
Yeah.
So every bit of their life is controlled in some way.
Yeah.
I feel so they have strict guidelines over what exactly they can keep in terms of what they produce.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to marry unless they go through various sort of hoops. They have to get the permission of the landlord. They have ridiculous restrictions placed on by the church. They're not allowed to marry on the eve or a day of a holiday, during fasting periods, before Christmas, after Christmas, during Easter week, and then on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So they can only marry at various. So even these very basic of things, kind of like they are prohibited from doing, unless they have strict permission and do it in a very ordered and structured way.
Do those religious rules apply to the landlords?
I think some of the religious rules probably do, but I think they're also they probably wouldn't be as strictly enforced because
plus the landlords
would
get away with it.
Yeah, exactly. The landlords would get away with it. But equally, I think quite importantly as well, life at this time was very structured in terms of who you spoke to, who you saw during as you were served. So you have your one basic unit of social interaction, which is the family, and then it goes one to the rung up to the village you live in, and then further on up to sort of the commune, which is a group of villages on this land, which is under, I think, basically an elected elder and a clerk who is also appointed, who then sort of
appointed by the landlord.
I think so. Basically, a combination of
the commune. I think in some ways there is a sort of an interesting point here. It's basically in order to make it easier for the landlord to tell the peasants what to do, to tell the serfs what to do. Rather, the peasant commune is like a sort of doing. He gives, he sets the tone, and the peasant commune organises all the micromanagement.
Yeah, and the commune's in charge of like passing out the land, who farms what, and then rotating it around so that everyone, at least in some people's minds, gets to lead a fair shot at farming some actually productive land every once in a while. So they have really, in terms of an actual serf's day-to-day life, the commune actually has quite a pretty big sort of say in what happens, because if you're not allowed to leave, they are basically the first arbiter of justice over you. And then you might be able to go and find the landowner, and if he's not, if he's willing to listen to you, then he might do something. But I think your first port of call serve is the commune, so they would have quite a lot of power, I think, against people.
Absolutely. Well, they've got to be sort of advantage of saying, "Oh, we speak on behalf of the land."
Yes. Yeah.
But even if they didn't, who
yeah.
even knows? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's just the bit that when I was researching this, sort of like this is like this really interesting. Just how these they're almost like they're not. It sounds ludicrous, but it's almost like they're the guards of the prison. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're also the prisoners.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they're sort of they're doing just to get they're almost like they're a level higher. They're level
well,
higher.
It's that classic thing is like if generally like they've got a tiny small bit more power, but they'll make sure they hang on to that with everything they can.
Absolutely, yeah. I know they're elected and all that, but I mean, I say elected, what that means it's period.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And
sorry.
And a couple of other things about serfdom. Obviously, probably to make people's mind, if you think about Russian military in this time, it's pretty vast. And this was based on serfdom as well, in that the serfs could be called up for military service. They wouldn't have really have an option not to go. They would be then conscripted and form these large Russian military forces that we'd seen in things like the Napoleonic Wars and later on the Crimean War, which will be very important as we'll find out.
I think at this point,
almost like the final insult for a serf is that to ram home the fact that you are the property of a landowner is that landowners at this time would mortgage their serfs, so they would borrow money on the security or the value of their serfs, and in 1820 around 20% of serfs were mortgaged to state-owned banks, and this rose to around 66% in 1859.
Yeah. So
there's a huge amount of what the nobility kind of got their funds from was tied up in serfs because they were literally taking loans out on their backs.
I don't understand what for though. I don't really understand what that would be for. Like, do you know what I mean?
Well, mortgaging.
Yeah. Why do they need the extra money if they're already?
Well, I think this is the thing that, as we'll see later on, they weren't overly productive in terms of what they did.
I was under the impression that quite a lot of fiefdoms, I suppose, were quite profitable up until they're abolished. But fair enough.
Also, the thing is, like, you see it all around, really, Western Europe as well. And then the nobility have a lot of money coming in, but they also have a huge amount of expenditure as well. And also, they also get to a point where I think they need cash as well, not just the promise of cash. So they might need to repair their dacha or something like that now, kind of thing, because they're entertaining their cousins who are coming from Moscow to visit them. And instead of waiting for the harvest to come in, they need the money now, so they'll mortgage their serfs, kind of thing. Yeah. Which is why I think it's the classic thing of happens now. You need cash, so you can pay a loan type thing up. But I think however much these people had, it's clear they always needed more.
Yeah. My first impression actually, usually historically, is borrowing is usually for a war. I don't really know what context. Well, I don't know.
I mean, it's also you have to think about it. If you're a noble, you don't just have one place to live. You also have to make sure you have a grand palace near the Tsar.
Yeah, of course.
You probably need somewhere you will go on on holiday to and get out of, but also relatively near to Moscow or St. Petersburg. And then you also have your estates to look after as well. So you've got a huge amount of things to look after, and then you might need to dole out patronage and other types of stuff. So I think I think they did have money coming in, but they were always in need of more. I think is what is my reading of the Russian nobility anyway. Yeah. And also they're all in competition with each other to make sure that they were the grandest and most opulent, weren't they? Yeah. But so sorry, you were
life of a landlord. It's like
before
the poor landlord can't afford the fifth house.
I just need more rubles now.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a grand ball going on. I need new epaulets on my uniform. So as we were talking about the Russian military, it did, it defeated Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars.
Up for discussion, I think.
Well, not
Russia, the interior defeated.
It did, but the Russians could soak up losses and stuff like Borodino that Napoleon really couldn't because they just had a big supply of cash and more men to literally shovel into the furnace. But so that did them relatively well in facing down Napoleon. Yeah. But now we're about nearly 40 years on from Napoleon, and we're at another conflict, which is the next great European conflict, I think. The Crimean War.
Well, the Crimean War essentially, Russia lost a home game. basically, invaded by France and Britain, and I think also one of the Italian states got involved. Like sent 1,000 troops. Fantastic. Well, maybe that's quite a lot that time. Anyway,
especially for their probably their small lands.
Yeah, but anyway, essentially, the Russian troops were completely outclassed by. I mean, I know we mentioned in a couple of the other episodes about how some of the technology was coming through in certain Russian, in the machinery of the war, like
explosive shells.
Yeah, exactly, explosive shells and the sort of rifling on the barrels of the guns, of cannons. But in terms of the training of the soldiers and professionalism of the army, they were much behind, I think. And this is the sort of catalyst for. And I think also there was a sort of indication that perhaps they were falling behind in terms of economy as well.
Yeah, I think on the Crimean War, I think especially it's the spark that lights the fuse almost, because it's a very clear indication that they've fallen massively behind, because they've had these vast armies, but they're no match for more motivated and more, as you say, professional British and French soldiers. And I think this is particularly galling for the Russians because they were very much after, I think, access to Mediterranean as well, so they could compete, which is why I think Britain and France were so keen to stop them getting in the Crimea and kicking the Ottomans out.
Yeah, they had a long running feud with the Ottomans, because obviously in the Ottoman Empire they had there's a whole segment of the Balkan area which was the principalities, which were Christian, but Russia was saying essentially, when something goes wrong, we're responsible for these people. Yeah. Even though they're in Ottoman territory.
Not only Christian, but also Slavic as well. So they have like a common genealogy almost.
Yeah. So I mean, there was a sort of wrangling annoyance there as well. Like they wanted to be sort of, I think they basically sort of land off them, didn't they? But
they wanted overlordship and they wanted to compete with these Western powers, which, as you just said, in terms of industry, also wasn't happening. So I think I saw it was quite ridiculous statistic.
Yeah.
Which shows that per hectare in the lead up to Crimean War, Russia was 50% less productive than Britain.
That's
at that time. So I mean, it's just like a horrific statistic. If you are the Tsar,
there's a lot more land, but
you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
I think this is whilst Britain's going through the Industrial Revolution,
the agricultural revolution.
I
think this is really important actually, because the agricultural revolution basically, you have so if you think of if you've got a patch of land where we've got 3 guys working on there, you can only throw so many more, let's say, serfs onto that same patch of land, and the productivity of what you're going to produce is still going to flatline.
Mm-hmm.
But Britain's sort of cracked the code, as it were.
Yeah,
they now can use new machinery, new techniques to make that land more productive.
And not just now; it's been going on for some decades. It's rolled out into France with Napoleon III trying to then compete with Britain. Obviously, what would become Germany's looking to get on the bandwagon as well. And you see all across Europe, Western Europe, that these countries are modernising. In America as well, even though the civil wars are encroaching, the North particularly is industrialising. And throughout the rest of what would be seen then as civilised society. Christendom, exactly. Christendom, Russia is like becoming more and more like the poor neighbour, and sort of being viewed more and more as a backward country. And I think also one of your favourite notes about industrialisation, particularly in cities, is that people can move. Do you want to say a bit about that in terms of the West, about how that helped?
One of them. Are you talking about sort of from the land into the urban?
So if there's a around the time of the Industrial Revolution, Britain particularly, when it's getting started, there was quite a lot of hardship in the countryside. So people were more willing to move into the cities to basically feed this new workforce that was needed. But in Russia,
I think the point is essentially where in certain areas people are using agricultural technology to produce more food and ship it into cities to make it more readily available. People who had their own farms or were peasants or whatever saw it basically as more fulfilling, that their life would just be better if they just left their own land and went and worked in a factory
because if they're being supplanted by this technology, they have another option. which is to move and leave and go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And it may not be palatable in the immediate sort of thought of them, but they can have the option to move, and lots of them did.
So the mobility, sorry, is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Sorry,
But in
flexibility
Russia,
as well.
flexibility and mobility, but in Russia at the time, as we said, if you're a serf, you literally cannot leave the land you're born on. So, you know, point one is that, as you said, Russia isn't industrializing in the countryside to actually make it more productive. And two, it's not really industrializing in cities either, because they can't get the workforce there, because you have these peasants, these serfs on the land, which, if they were mobile, would come to the cities for better jobs, better wages, but they can't get there at that time.
Yeah. I was going to say, there is, when I was reading Stephen Nefzinger's PhD thesis, he was saying about how some, it varied quite a lot across Russia, you understand, but some estates were so arm's length from their landlord. Their landlord was so sort of, I don't know, quite relaxed about what was going on there, that they had, first of all, developed some industry, because there was mobility of some of the serfs.
So because these landowners were kind of absentee, that they while the cat's away, the mice.
I think so. I mean, it could be that, but then in some of those situations, it's even worse, because the peasant commune is doing the landlord's work, micromanaging. So I'm not sure what the exact reason is. And then in certain situations, the landlord is providing sort of, not exactly public services, but like sort of what you would recognise in a modern, like certain things that government might be providing in Britain, say, like a court system, or you know, sort of
kind of decent infrastructure.
Provisional like road systems, and like, I mean, not nothing as big as like railways or anything like that, but factories in some cases.
You kind of get
very limited.
You kind of get them the idea of that in some of, if you read stuff like War and Peace, you get some of the nobles who are actually interested in improving the lives of their peasants and their serfs, and but others who are just against it and to see it as a way of keeping them down, and to making sure they get the money and the wealth from the land. But you get others who are kind of a bit more liberal, sort of westernised, more urbanised, westernised, and willing to actually invest and see almost as a quick growth in that they will, you know,
I was going to say,
if their workforce is better off.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the period, I think you would call it enlightenment.
Like, that's exactly it's exactly what it is, enlightened. I think this is also another, actually, just enlightenment in general is another sort of driver behind serfdom being seen in Russia as a sort of a drag on them, because you have in the West more and more people becoming aware of it and more able to criticise it. So you have
serfdom as a concept. I think there's definitely. I agree with you. There's definitely a sort of a. I mean, obviously we see the move against slavery, and then obviously in Britain abolished slavery in the British colonies in 1833, and banned buying something of slaves in Britain in 1807, as early as. And by 1843, all of the slaves in Britain were freed. So,
this is quite British Empire.
Is it British Empire? Okay.
Because you couldn't own a slave in Britain for a long time. In the colonies it was.
That makes more sense, actually. So it is almost like. But again, as you say, Russia is still quite a long way behind.
Yeah, and I think it's partly because it takes them a lot longer to actually get these sort of more liberal Western ideas into the system. So you have these sort of intellectuals criticise them from Britain and France, and then slowly but surely it does work its way into Russia, and you start getting more people
into the Russian zeitgeist.
Exactly, more people starting to sort of speak out and realising actually, if we want to compete with Britain and France in terms of actually industrialising, in terms of making things, making the economy work, and then also, if that fails, if we want to compete with them militarily as well, there's one big thing we need to reform, and that is the 20 million other people who are serfs.
Making sure that basically people's property.
Yeah, exactly, and this is a thing we need to get out of our system. And I think at the end of the war, so around 1855, Alexander II comes to the throne as Tsar. So he's kind of very much on the cusp of this.
Sorry, this is the Crimean War.
Crimean War. So we've had the humiliation. We're in the last death throes of the humiliation of the war. And I think this is quite important for the emancipation, because almost at the exact time that Russia was, the right time that Russia was sort of at this nadir of being shown very publicly to not be able to compete. They have a new leader who is able to learn these lessons and then almost begin to push them through. So do you want to talk a little bit about the processes of what happened?
Sure.
It's always dangerous. Is there anything else you wanted to cover on why it needed to go? So we've had the Crimean War humiliation. We've had the fact that Russia couldn't compete in terms of industrializing. We've got this slow upsurge of Russian liberalism as well. In the criticism growing. Yeah. And also we've got Alexander II coming in at almost the right time.
Yeah.
So is there anything else?
Was the perfect time.
Yeah, exactly. So literally the man for the moment.
I mean, not really. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that this is a well, first of all, merely from a sentiment point of view, horrific system.
Yeah.
So you've got your liberal sentiments, liberal sort of sympathies, but also it's not really very productive in the this sort of micromanaging of. Well, obviously, the micromanagement of estates is not very productive, but also the fact that these people are literally tied to the land for life, well, forever.
Yes, and there's it is literally
in perpetuity.
Yeah, them and their descendants. And and when you have something like that, there's literally, we were talking about it before, and you said literally no real incentive for them to improve their productivity. Because
and it's sort of sorry.
I just say the more they produce, the more it's going to go away. So like however much they produce, they're still going to have to give away loads of it. So there's no point in actually having that. There's no incentive there to actually better yourself almost.
And I actually think as well, over time, obviously, if you're farming the same land over and over again, I mean, I'm not an expert farmer, but just through the pure, law of...
Well, you degrade land if you...
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially... exactly. So your production is going to sort of gradually go down if you're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again without additional, obviously, investment with technology, I assume. So it's sort of almost, in a way, it's almost economically hopeless as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, and then so off all the back of this, you've got all these different factors coming into play.
Yeah.
And another thing that
So I was going to say as well. I mean, given that the nobles are obviously the ones who are they the ones fighting the wars though? Because they've been relieved of.
Well, that's what I'm just coming on to.
Okay. So I'm just trying to work out. I mean, obviously, there's the liberal aspect of I want my people to be fine, to be contented, which you seem to forget about during the Middle Ages. But anyway, like why? Again, returns to the question: why does
Well, I think
does the improvement in the economy mean that he has more tax cash?
This is what I think it is. Partially, I think it is he's thinking, enough's enough. The country needs to modernise because we're falling so far behind.
Yeah.
It's a prestige thing for Russia. It's also an economic thing. So one, you get more money from having a more productive nation.
Yeah.
And as he is the person basically at the top of the pyramid, he needs that money.
Yeah.
And also, I think partially he also is looking to cement his power over the nobles as well and the landowners.
Yeah.
One thing I always see when I know an expert in Russian history, but it always seems that Tsars are almost a lot of the time living in fear of their nobles, and so I think he saw this as also a way of just reaffirming who was in charge.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean,
who was the Tsar.
Yeah. I think in a sort of a medieval style feudalist kind of society, there is always that danger that your nobles can rise up against you. Because everyone's sort of almost at the same level. Like you said before about if you've got more land, then you do sort of have more power, but then you've also got more land to spread it over.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas the Industrial Revolution obviously allows you to concentrate your tax cash, I suppose, into without having the expenditure, I suppose.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
No, and I think this process of one sort of taking on the nobles over serfdom and two actually trying to move towards abolishing it had started before Alexander II.
Yeah.
So you had people like Paul III who in 1762 took away one of the legs that serfdom stood on, which was to exempt nobles from having to do military service. So when serfdom first came in.
The justification.
One justification was it was almost like a quid pro quo thing as well. That if the Russian nobles agreed to serve in the army and tie themselves more to the Tsar and the country, then serfdom would continue. Serfdom would be there on a surer footing.
Yeah.
Obviously, once that had been done away with, that created a basis for moving towards emancipation because there was no
need for it.
The nobles had lost their sort of it was a benefit for the noble, but the noble wasn't on fulfilling his end of the bargain anymore because he wasn't
he wasn't protecting
give military service to the Tsar. And then also you see him the rule of Catherine the Great, measures coming in to stop excessively cruel treatment against serfs, so they couldn't literally just be beaten for no reason. And landowners were.
It's just like this whole concept before the 19th century. Well, before I suppose probably the mid 18th century, isn't it? But the Enlightenment, I think, would brought us in. But it's the whole concept where these people are basically not even human.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it sort of reminded them on a daily basis. Just that they are a lower order almost.
Yeah.
And then so you had that, trying to protect them from excessively cruel treatment, and also mandating that landowners had to help them in terms of times of famine by keeping stockpiles there.
Yeah.
It's debatable how much this actually helped because a lot of the time they weren't followed through, and Russia's so vast that people can get away with stuff without the Tsars interfering.
Yeah,
because they can't actually get to them to dispense justice. But I think it shows that from centre there was this ongoing willingness to try and tackle it.
Yeah. I was going to say that you just reminded me of the other point I was going to make earlier about the being tied to the land.
Yeah.
And preserved, frozen in this sort of agricultural society. Famine is obviously like just a frequent disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And
which by industrialising you rise out.
Yeah, you're no longer tied to literally making your own food.
Yeah.
And if that fails, then your life is in danger. Kind of thing.
Yeah. And also your population is limited because as the production is limited, because you've only got a certain number of people, you've only got a certain number of land that you can put the people on.
Yeah.
So that technology, you're sort of anyway.
So this gradual process of improving the serf's lot, in very fits and starts, and not really actually happening, but sort of tinkering on the edges, brings us again to Alexander II, who he took about 5 years from beginning the public call for it to then negotiating with the landowners and trying to, and within his own government going through various committees trying to make sure that it actually happened. There was a big negotiation over exactly how dependent the serfs would be on the landowners. So when it first came out, landowners favoured giving them freedom, but not actually giving them land, so that the serfs would be able to have free, but they would have nothing to farm, nothing to actually give themselves.
Absolutely. They wouldn't be able to sustain themselves.
It would be unsustainable. In the end, obviously, that was overruled, and it was decided that serfs would be given portions of land as well as their freedom.
Which is actually it had a better deal than most of the freed slaves got.
I think so.
Not that. I mean,
but I think the nobles in this time were quite actually trapped by their debts. By their seeming addiction to mortgaging their serfs, they trapped themselves, and they didn't have much room to manoeuvre because they didn't have these big funds of cash to be able to pull back on. So they were kind of manoeuvred away from their serfs, partially because of that.
It's quite good. I mean, I think that was obviously where the state, obviously, the Russian state had so much power over them because they were basically incapable of keeping a budget.
I think it helped, but also there were, just finally before we come on to what happened afterwards, there were 3 important things that limited the emancipation and made it palatable to your landowners. One was that there would be a 2-year transition period, so in that 2 years the serfs would still be working for the landowner and conditions would stay the same. Secondly, large areas of common land still remained with landowners, so they were free to then create tolls and sort of make it very difficult for serfs to get across land and without being crippled with payments for moving across there, and they would hang on to areas of forest which brought them income as well. And thirdly, serfs would have to pay their former masters for the privilege of being free. So what actually happened in effect was the Tsar, the state, advanced around 75% of the capital for freeing them, and then the serfs would repay the money in so-called redemption payments over a course of around 49 years to the state. So
is that via the landlord?
So no, I think
via
the commune. So this commune we spoke about earlier, which is sort of overlording it over the villages in some small way, is then responsible for collecting the money, I think, and sending it back. And this is actually one side thing linked to another episode where we're potentially doing this sort of spider web of Crimean War fallout, is that Russia, one of the major driving forces behind selling Alaska was to cover this outlaying cash the Tsar had to give to landowners to free the serfs.
Essentially, they sold Alaska.
To America.
To the Americans. This is insane.
So that was one of the reasons. There were others, but that was one of the reasons to cover themselves. I think 1867 they sold it.
Did we mention that in the New York draft riots episode?
I think so, yeah.
Maybe not, maybe different.
But yeah, so, and I think, as well as these three issues that would make emancipation not the brilliant silver bullet that many people thought it might be, there was also the issue that, the commune divided the land. So often peasants were left with the lesser land, less productive land, and the landowners got the more productive land out of it. But from Alexander II's viewpoint, he'd emancipated the serfs.
It's a great PR victory.
Yeah, a great PR victory for him, because he'd emancipated 20-odd million people. We should say that serfs on his land actually got
extra time.
Emancipated in 1866, so 5 years later. Although they actually got better terms usually.
So
I think he kind of saw the kinks in the system. But yeah, so I mean, the large majority of serfs were emancipated in 1861, and then 1866. The state serfs were.
I mean, how many state serfs were there? 9.5. So basically, the 10.5 million privately owned serfs.
All of these figures are kind of a bit. They're always.
Well, this is from the census.
So it's like, roughly though speaking.
This is 1857 to 8 tax census, right?
It is, but I'm just saying that there's always some debate around it. So we're not saying for definite this is how many, but you're right. There was.
Just to give you an idea.
It gives you an idea.
10.5 million privately owned, 9.5 million state owned, and 900,000 in the Tsar's personal patronage. It's like ludicrous numbers of people. But
and these people have emancipated. So as I said, PR victory for the Tsar. And after that, everything's fine. Russia industrialised at a massively fast rate. Everyone was happy.
Became a glorious capitalist
nation. And it competed with Britain and France the rest of those days.
And it was the new
the Tsar rules happily ever after. Nothing bad happened to the Tsars.
Well, indeed, absolutely what happened in opposite world. But in 1911, Lenin said that the year 1861 begot the year 1905. Obviously, 1905 was the dress rehearsal for the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Communist Revolution. For the layman. But from my own analysis of this situation, for what it's worth, the key thing that went wrong here is that they replaced one landlord with another. Essentially, they replaced the landlord, who was micromanaging his estates or whatever you want to refer, whatever you want to say. The problem is there, and then obviously the problem varied with which estate and where they were and so on. As I said earlier, some landlords were actually quite light touch, so they sort of had more freedom, or their estate was built up slightly more industrially. Maybe, I would say pretty more cottage industry than massive factories, but still better than most of them. And then some of them were obviously just complete subsistence level. But they replaced the landlord with the commune, which was pretty much had the same powers and was essentially it had all the same.
It was just as conservative.
It's not like they said, okay, go forth, my brothers, and sort of prosper. It was more like, okay, we're going to carry on the exact same system, but now we're in charge.
Like where landowners and nobles had been disinterested in investing in new technology, similarly the commune was equally, seemingly, in many areas, was equally as disinterested in actually industrialising, bringing new technology into farming. Which was probably a it was just huge.
As we said about the law of diminishing returns, more like you can't carry on in the same way forever, because you just run out of money. And presumably were they also in charge of managing the debts to the state?
Were, from what I've read, they were responsible for kind of the state would be paid back through them. So the people in the communal areas would gather their money, funds they've made, and then pay it into the commune, who would then pay it to the state. And so they become this sort of arbiter of people's lives in many ways. And I think another sort of important point is that for a serf to migrate to the cities and join in these new factory work and stuff, they would have to sell up all their land or give their land over to the commune. So automatically they would have to give away a lot of stuff to be able to do it in the first place.
Plus, as you sorry.
No, saying which was seen by many peasants, or peasants that are now, as a block on their actual desire to move. Because and also I think psychologically speaking, you've literally lived on that whole land forever. Your whole history is in this thing as well. So I think it wasn't just as simple as flicking a switch and saying you're free. You can go and move around and migrate into where better work is, kind of thing. They've got these things tying them to land in terms of shared histories, and this is the land of my father, and he found this, so I found that type of thing.
Yeah. But I mean, I think just on that, the commune obviously retained some of the coercive powers.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Prevented the serfs from prevented their free peasants from moving. But I agree with you. I mean, it's sort of it's quite interesting because in as we sort of mentioned, in Europe this came to an end because the Black Death ravaged through the countries of Europe and made it almost inevitable that they had to move in order to survive. Whereas in this case, they're just sort of frozen in time, like just stuck on these. I think that should probably be right, but frozen in time on these just ancient sort of estates that they've always been on. And when you look at literature during the Russian Revolution, all the students and sort of people like that who are talking about what's going on, it's always like when they go their home is. When they see somebody, they would always automatically recognise somebody who's from their place.
Yeah.
It's like, without doubt, you would know exactly who it is. It's from your village, and even if you were out somewhere else. And people stuck together in these same groups when they're at university and this kind of thing. But,
I think actually, almost coming towards a close with, that's quite an important point as well in terms of this feeding into this sort of, into the revolution. In terms of Lenin, exactly what it is, resentment. Because the peasants are almost like, it was almost their sort of freedom had been given to them, but it was also still just out of reach in real terms. So they had the sort of, now the name of a free man, but in reality, there's so much there that they didn't have still and couldn't get because they had so little.
And actually, I think this is one of the most severe things as well is that unlike the original industrializing countries and as peasants become modern industrial workers and then later consumers in the 19th century, in Britain they didn't have this sort of thing off in the distance where these people are doing really well and industrializing all this kind of stuff. Whereas Russian, they can see it all. Well, not see it all, but presumably they would.
But they know this. They know that they're
out there somewhere. Everyone's doing better than them, basically, which is must be pretty severe as well. Yeah.
But yes, I mean, in real terms,
and also who's stopping them? It's
that point of people out there doing better than somebody else. So another quite horrifying stat that I dug up. Around in 1900, Russian productivity was around 25% of Britain's. So it didn't really there wasn't a huge long-term bounce in terms of productivity and an upsurge in it at all by the look of things.
Yeah. Just I just think by the looks of it was like I said, they were sort of frozen in time.
Yes,
couldn't shake it off.
Conditions. Yeah.
So thanks to almost hundreds of years of just the same drudgery.
Do you have anything else to say, or do you want to move on to further reading before we can just wrap up? And
yeah, I mean,
do you have any further reading to do?
I do. Yeah, I was going to say I had a sort of fun fact about why. The fun fact about American serfdom, which never really took place.
Oh yeah,
so it's tangentially related.
Well, no, we'll do this. We'll have a fun fact. Then we'll do further reading. Then
which
we'll
is almost just as fun.
Exactly.
So in America, when it was first colonized, it was the original idea was to establish it under the feudalist system. The standard parceling out of land that they would then pay their tithes to the Duke of York, the king's brother at the time. But because the land there was so much land and there was nobody there, they sort of took it. The Duke of York decided to actually parcel it out in small segments and actually sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is almost like the economics just wouldn't. The feudalist system was not economically, just wasn't plausible.
Yeah, well, it wasn't ingrained from the start in that. Whereas in Russia, exactly. People can remember, but from the first, one of the first steps out there. One of the first, but one of the major bits out there, it was something completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it just wouldn't compute basically because people were going there voluntarily, whereas obviously in Russia they were already there and they weren't allowed to move away. So it's an interesting situation. Yeah. So that's why I never took off in America.
So James II, as he was to become, had one good thing in his life.
Yeah, well, there you go. Indeed. But yeah, I think we should move on to the further reading.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite, my absolute favourite source for this actually is one that I was reading so avidly, and probably will carry on reading after this. Is Stephen Nafziger's doctorate thesis, essentially. He's from William College, USA, and he's looking at the economic reasons why the abolition of serfdom didn't really do anything. It's fascinating. I mean, I'll put the full title on the show notes page. Unfortunately, I haven't got the full title in front of me. But
one of those things. Always doctoral theses always seem to have massive titles.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I can't remember. I'm afraid. But yeah, I mean, it was very recently written as well, and very interesting insight. Yeah.
Nice.
Do you have anything?
I have a couple of things, and controversially, both fictional.
Oh wow.
So first one is a book called Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol.
Oh yeah.
Which is kind of an interesting look into Russia and Russian society, and involves a man travelling around buying serfs essentially, as you see throughout it. It's a good sort of insight into how Russian society functioned. And the second one, Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, which is again looking at Russian society in the time of when the emancipation reforms were happening, and shows through various strands of the plot the life of serfs, life of peasants, and also the landowners who lorded it over them in many ways.
Indeed.
So they were my two, both interesting in their own right, I think. But obviously there's a huge amount of sort of factual stuff out there as well, which goes into great detail about the reforms. So just have a look around, and then there's good books about it. Good.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so integrally as well tied inexorably to events nearly 50 years later.
Yeah.
When it all kicked off, and I mean, there it is. Like Lenin is saying this is one of the reasons for the Russian Revolution.
And I think sort of in concluding, that is a key thing that we need to remember from this episode. In that, although serfdom was clearly an aberration in terms of it being practiced, and it was holding Russia back massively, and you can see that in both industrial terms and in military terms. Even though there was this great emancipation at Alexander II, and the system was done away with, what came after it was virtually no better. And as he clearly says, it really fed into the Russian Revolution. Basically.
I think well, one of the most important things is essentially that flexibility for people to go and do as they please, essentially, which even though they were free, they weren't allowed to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it just makes no sense that this would be the case. But I mean, from industrial development in Western Europe, that was what that was one of the main things. But yeah, I suppose. Unless you've got anything extra.
No, that's it.
The time's up for today. Welcome to another episode.
Thanks for listening to Footnotes of History. For more episodes, visit footnotesofhistory.com and subscribe. Or, if you want to suggest an episode to us, email us on episodes@footnotesofhistory.com. You can also follow us on social media @FOH Podcast for Twitter, and we're also on Instagram and YouTube. Thanks for listening.